Hello and welcome to the Growth Project. I am Dr. Milt Lowder, joined today by Dr. Drew Brannon. What's up?
Good to be here. Always enjoy it.
So for those of you new to this podcast, it's called the Growth Project. It's sponsored and produced by AMPLOS. We are a small performance psychology practice and located in Greenville, South Carolina, who work in the world of college sports and elite athletes, as well as corporate America, in all things helping people be better and pursue better. You know, our goal at AMPLOS is to optimize who you are and what you do, to make sure that you don't, as John Wooden likes to say, get too busy making a living that you forget about making a life. We like to bring these aspects of psychological skills and leadership and development and all these factors of high performance to you, so you can figure out how to put them to practice into your life. And so today, a topic we really want to talk about is coachability. You hear that word all the time. Drew and I thought it would be good to have a conversation around how to become more coachable, what it is, why is it so important. And so, Drew, when you hear the word coachability, why do you think that's so important in today's world?
I just don't know a context in which it doesn't matter. Truly. I mean, you think about, what's the word? Ubiquitous? I don't use that word a whole lot.
Ubiquitous.
But this is truly a ubiquitous construct, whether you're talking about, think about your kids. What do you hope your kids will be, amongst other things? Coachable. You want your kids to be coachable. Certainly in sports, it's got, an obvious application there. And then, heck, in the world of corporate America and all the industries that we work in, this comes up all the time. You think about, like, if and when someone on a team is maybe getting into some hot water and they're having some degree of concern about, like, is he or she going to make it? What's a common reason why people lose patience with people on teams? They're not coachable.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that coin of, like, when they're making hiring decisions about who they're welcoming to the team, we work in hiring a bunch, and this comes up again and again and again, where people will ask the question of, like, hey, is he coachable? Will he be coachable? How coachable is he? This is a topic that is prevalent in all facets of life at all places in the lifespan.
I think it's one that we often overlook. I think about parents and their children. While we want them to be coachable, the pressure parents put on their children to be successful often comes in conflict with being coachable.
Yeah.
Especially you think about youth sports, like we try to make it all about that one child, and we've undermined the coach, we've undermined authority, we've undermined those in leadership positions. And so this tension of, we know very few people who have, quote unquote, been successful who have not been coachable.
Yeah.
There's a very, very minute few who have the talent, the skill set, the bandwidth, who aren't coachable, were not maybe at least coachable in one form or fashion.
Yeah, but word of warning, don't let that be your example.
Yes.
Like, don't let that be your model, because overwhelmingly, those that are not coachable pay the price for it.
Well, the good news is they probably aren't listening to this podcast. They probably already have it all figured out.
Yeah, so I think just as we're talking about how relevant this topic is for our listeners out there, as we go through this conversation here in the coming minutes, we would recommend you think about how we're framing this across all facets of your life.
Yes.
Don't just think about your professional identity, although think about your professional identity. Don't just think about that. Think about your personal life. Think about how this applies in all the roles that you play in your life.
And I think that's the right place. It's you, right? It's so easy to listen to something like this. And right now, I'm even thinking as we were putting together about my wife or my children or people that I work with or clients of ours, are they coachable or not? And the first one I got to look at is me. How coachable am I? And then we can talk about how to look for and develop coachability in others. So let's define it at least. When you think about coachability, how would you define or describe a person who is coachable?
I think it's, different, varying definitions. What we're going to go with for the purposes of our conversation is a readiness and willingness to learn, adapt, and change based upon feedback. So in other words, like, this is the degree to which a person is pliable, moldable, and changeable based upon feedback that they're receiving, which can come in many, many forms, right? And we'll get into feedback. But as you hear that word feedback, I think oftentimes we really kind of just restrict that to, like, hey, so-and-so over here popped up one day and told me X, and that is feedback.
Yeah.
But you know what else provides feedback? Life. Just the turning and the events of life where you're getting results of some type. Maybe you're not getting results of some type. Like that's feedback. So it's a willingness to just pay attention to what life is also throwing at you.
Yeah. And so then, as you said, it's not being open and willing to pay attention. It's, okay, am I going to implement any ideas or like what I've learned?
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, I can be open to it and I can listen to it and I can try to pay attention to what's going on. But being coachable means I'm going to take action. Yeah. Whether it's life giving me that feedback or a peer or a child or a friend or a colleague or a coach or a leader, like I'm going to put something to action. I care enough about you and about me that I'm going to take action on it.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in greater detail as we go, but that's an interesting point too, because if someone's providing feedback to someone and they're saying maybe verbally that they're in agreement, but they're not doing anything about it, well, they mustn't agree too much, right? Because they're not agreeing enough to take action.
Yeah, it's not just acquiescing; it's taking action on what I've learned. And I think, to me, the traits we keep talking about that pop up all the time that I think describe someone who is coachable. One, as you said, that openness and willingness to change and adapt. But to me, what are some of those traits? Curiosity, humility, vulnerability, those things that really lead to being coachable. And they're interested in getting better. They aren't interested in perfection.
Yeah, or being right all the time.
Yeah, they're always kind of just focused on improving, and they're willing to learn from everyone. I think that's when I think about people that are coachable. It's not just, hey, well, this person's an expert, I'm going to listen to them. Like, I'm going to pay attention to other people. I'm going to learn what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's somebody who's coachable.
Right.
And from our perspective, these people are so much fun to work with.
Yeah. Well, they're so much fun to work with, and then that'll kind of like lead us into a little bit of talking about like why this matters and why it's so important. They're extremely fun to work with. They're extremely good for your team.
Yeah.
How do you create a culture or within a team or an organization of learners and of people who are humble enough? You get enough people in there who are coachable. It's amazing how infectious this can be and how it spreads when you have people who are living this way, and how people who maybe are sitting across the table take notice of that.
I just started smiling because I think about our core values. All of that kind of really describes someone who might be coachable, right? Growth in terms of a growth mindset and willingness to grow. Hustle, they're willing to get after it, put some work in. Humility, they're willing to ask for help, and they're willing to be a part of a team.
Yeah.
And understanding those strengths. I'd never thought about that until I heard you say those are the kind of people we not only enjoy working with as clients, but it's who we want to invite to be a part of our team.
Yeah, so it absolutely has a massive value out on your team. I think another, while we're on that topic of like why it matters, the lie, unfortunately, that too many people have bought along the way out there when it comes to growth and aspirational goals and that type of thing, is that they can do it on their own.
Yeah.
That you can kind of like, I'm not a big fan of this term, but it comes up a bunch, self-actualize or optimize or whatever it is, that you can do those things in a independent contractor, lone wolf type model. Hate to break it to you, it's not how it works.
Yeah, we try to buy into that in America especially. And to me, I firmly believe that growth and greatness cannot occur in isolation. I say that as well as selfish ambition. Yeah. Right? I can't think of a self-made man or woman that I know of that didn't have other people believe in them, encourage them, challenge them, mold them, shape them, help develop them along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then and I've had conversations like that before with people that maybe want to push back at least a little bit on that, which I'm always okay with that. There's an additional kind of caveat I've also ended to it that goes like this. Those that maybe have, who you want to argue have found a way to do this on their own, but were they happy in the end? And that's the caveat of like, okay, if there's this outlier example of whoever this is who wasn't that coachable and yet was on their own and became this like, elite. Okay, I don't know who that is, but if that person's out there, were they happy at the end? And I doubt it.
Okay, yeah. So there's a difference between somebody who has a chance to be successful on their own and by themselves versus people that are coachable.
But I'm saying people that who that fully maximized, topped out, became the best they possibly could on their own.
Yeah.
If that's somehow true somewhere, I have a hard time believing they're happy at the end.
And it came at the extent and cost of something else.
That's the point.
And some other people.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you.
Carnage in the wake, that type of thing. Yeah, so it's, in terms of why it matters, it is a necessary ingredient for us becoming our best, however you define that. You just can't do it on your own.
Yeah, and I think, when we think about coachability, we think about having a high sense of self-awareness, right, in order to be coachable. And why that matters is high levels of self-awareness leads to, and the research supports, and you can help me out with this, a higher level of job satisfaction, a higher level of enjoyment, a higher level of skill development, more productive, more efficient, more effective at their work and their jobs. And so part of being coachable is really having a high level of self-awareness about what my strengths are and what they aren't.
Yeah.
And how do I get along well with others, and how do I impact others, and how do I connect with others, and what gets in the way?
Yep. All of that. And it's, it's interesting how that operates, right? Because you think like, oh, well, something like self-awareness, why does that matter so much? I mean, think about all the application you just made right there of how it benefits us in what we do personally and professionally. Hugely impactful, but we're not very good at it.
No. We
think we're great at it, but we aren't that good at being self-aware, which has a lot to do with why we tend not to be coachable. Like it's an extremely normal thing for two people to get into a conversation, maybe about a topic they need some coaching on, and one person begins to get defensive, and the other person maybe asks them, hey, why are you getting defensive? I'm not.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not getting, and they really don't think they are.
Yeah.
Because they lack the awareness needed to know that.
Or even why, like even asking the question that way immediately suggests you should be doing something different.
Yeah.
So
true.
even how we ask the questions. And so, as we think about what coachability is, we've talked a little bit about why it's so important. What gets in the way? What prevents one from being coachable?
Many of the same things that get in the way of us being aware, quite honestly. The pace at which we move, the charmed way we like to or prefer to think of ourselves, the ways in which we've been esteemed in the past, and we've kind of only latched on to that type of language and that type of feedback, and maybe not given as much of a look at the constructive criticism that we've gotten. So we've kind of built, people are quick to build a persona, whether it's conscious or unconscious, of themselves in a really positive light. And if you're seeing yourself that way, you don't see the need for coaching oftentimes.
And I think it's somewhat the way we shape and look at our career development and our personal development, that the longer you do something, the longer you live, the older you are, the more expert you're supposed to be.
Should be, yeah.
The pressure it puts on someone to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. How many times we see leaders at a senior level not be very coachable because they're in the senior level, they're in the C-suite because they're supposed to have all the answers.
Right.
And so that pressure to really know it all really is incompatible with a coachability mindset.
Yeah, you're not that same person who feels like he or she needs to have the answers.
Yes.
Isn't going to be real quick to go pursue help.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to...
Or receive it.
Yeah, those lies of, I have to have all the answers. I should know what I'm doing. I should be the expert. And I think if we're honest, you and I can feel that pressure. We've been doing this for 20-something years now, that you think you can fall into the trap that, hey, your way works, or your way should work, or you should know more than you know.
Yep.
And I think that kind of... When you're young, it's okay to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to somebody last week about young people breaking into this business that I was speaking to this gentleman about. He said, yeah, I think when you're in your 20s, you need to ask a lot of questions. People will love to help you when you're in your 20s. But in your 30s, they start seeing you as competition. Mm. And they don't want to see you as competition. They don't want to invest in you. They don't want to coach you. And so it's even setting that up as, hey, I'm coachable in my 20s when I'm really learning and growing. But now that I'm in the field, I don't need to be coachable. I need to be confident. Mm. And those constructs are not...
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Yeah, but we almost kind of make them that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That if I'm confident, then I maybe don't need to be coachable.
Yeah.
So let's walk through kind of the sequence of this, of kind of how this comes together and what it looks like. Of the person who's coachable is doing this pretty well. The person who wants to be more coachable would be wise to understand how it fits together, because I do think there's a clear kind of like sequence in which this operates. So let's jump into it, beginning with, so what creates the fertile ground for someone to be coachable?
Yeah, so I guess the foundation that we're really talking about, the lens that you really need to develop around coachability is that growth mindset.
Yep.
And to me, when we've talked so much about a growth mindset and really born out of that achievement goal theory by Dweck and her colleagues, but to me, why that is so important, sets the foundation, is this belief really that better never rest. That I can always improve, I can always learn, I can always get better. Progress is one of my favorite words, and a fundamental principle of those with a growth mindset. It's how we interpret success and failure. It's how we interpret mistakes. And I think people with a growth mindset are more likely to be coachable because, as you said earlier, they're constantly learning from everything around them. Mm-hmm. They're constantly paying attention, and they're willing to learn. I think about Tiger Woods on the golf course at his prime. Like, he would go ask Brad Faxon. He would go great putter. He would go seek a short game help. Whoever was better at something, he was so curious and willing to grow and learn and implement that into his game.
Yep. Yeah. So here's the connection I've always made there when it comes to growth is, well, how do you grow? How does anything grow? You add to it, right? Yeah. And so you think about one of the more common ways we think about adding to in the world today is like eating. Right. So you add when you eat, that's how that works. I'm not a nutritionist, but I know how that works. And so with these growth mindset people, what's unique about them? They're hungry.
Yes.
They're really, really hungry for help, hungry for knowledge, hungry for information, for facts. They're hungry for anything that's out there that will help them develop. And what they aren't doing is sitting back and being like a real critical consumer as much about like, oh, well, what could I possibly learn from her?
Yes.
She's only been here for a year.
Yeah.
Or what could I possibly learn from him? He's an undergraduate student. Or they don't do that.
No, they avoid labeling themselves and others. Yeah. Right? They separate who they are from what they do. That's being coachable, means I'm not so closely tied to my position. I've separated my ego from my performance. And so they don't label themselves, they don't label others. And I think those labels oftentimes set limits on our own growth and what we're willing to learn from others.
Yeah, and there's no question it does. Okay, so let's keep walking this pathway. So what we're saying is what creates the fertile ground, what really gives us an opportunity and a chance to be good in this arena begins with mindset.
Yeah.
So we have this growth mindset. Then we build into what's our next step on this pathway here?
To me, and maybe they go hand in hand, but I think it's a sense of humility.
Yeah.
And we both love that definition from C.S. Lewis about what humility really is. He says, true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And so to me, the right sense of humility, it's not a false sense of humility that we see a lot. It's not a false sense of self-deprecation that we often see, this false air of humility. It's a really sense and grounded in, I really know who I am. I know what my strengths are. I think I know where I can add value, but I also know there's so much left for me to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
That I'm willing to submit is the word that comes to mind, but that's not the right word. I'm willing to ask for help. I'm willing to learn. To me, that's the proper sense of humility.
Yeah. So let's play that out because this can be real interesting. And we've seen examples that are good and examples that are not so good of you can have an extremely growth-oriented mindset. So take the individual who just devours books and devours podcasts and racks up all these points in a given year that it would just blow you away. It's like, how could anybody possibly have that much time to pursue growth? Well, believe it or not, this person's doing that. However, what do they not have? Humility.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see how if you were to kind of like go down the tunnel of pursuing this growth mindset related stuff and come out on the other side, do you find yourself thinking more highly of yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you find yourself thinking, having an even greater realization of all the things you don't have mastered, of all the things you don't know?
I think that's the person who's really growing the right way, is they realize that gap, that huge gap that exists between who they are and who they want to be.
Right. That's the humility, though.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we've both seen people who are like, growth mindset gurus, but it's in a sense where all these things they're doing are just making them feel better about themselves.
Yeah, they're so proud that they're able to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so proud that they're able to do it. And that humility is the antidote to that.
Yeah, and that's why as we walk through this, that's why it's you can't just have one of these.
No.
Like people who are highly coachable, they have all of these.
The growth mindset tempered with humility, right? That sets you over success. So you have both of those. What do we think is the next thing you really need to have to be coachable?
Once you've got the growth mindset, you've got the humility, then you've got to have a sense of urgency, right? You've got to get moving. Although it's great, it's a great beginning to have the mindset we want, to also have the humility and be willing to look honestly at yourself and acknowledge your weaknesses, your flaws, your limitations, whatever they might be. But if the process of doing that doesn't then trigger action,
Yeah.
we don't change, right? Like you don't. It's the equivalent of the player in the sports arena who, when he receives coaching, doesn't get defensive, but then also doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not the goal here. The goal is to improve and develop and grow. And so we've got to use the humility to then get moving. We've got to engage in the actions.
Yeah, and so awareness without action, we always say leaves you worse off than you were before. And
Right.
so we talk about being coachable and that sense of self-awareness that is necessary. But if I don't put that into practice, then I'm not very coachable. I'm just passive.
Yep.
And I may be curious, I may be humble, I may have a growth mindset, but I'm not putting anything into practice.
Yeah. I mean, if let's just make it up. Like if Sally consistently walks into her big presentations without having enough awareness or knowledge about the customer, as great as it is for her supervisor to have a conversation with her and give her that direct feedback and her receive it, if she keeps walking into presentations having not prepped well enough, maybe you could say she's coachable, but she's not doing a whole lot with the information.
Yeah, she's not coachable. She's open to information.
Yeah.
Right. She's just a passive recipient. What Sally would be doing in that case is what so many of us do. It's hard to quit doing what works for us.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to change because Sally's got to this stage of her career by doing what she's always done. And very seldom does she have that sense of urgency to go with this newfound awareness. And she might say, yeah, you're right. But then there's no action with it.
There's no actual demonstration of, hey, I'm working on this.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking action on this information that I've now seen about myself.
And I think the people that can take an idea and implement that idea, like I talk about all the time, how like I want to be quicker at implementing the ideas that I have. Mm-hmm. But they have to be consistent with the growth of AMPLOS, the growth of myself, what we're trying to accomplish. But this sense of urgency means it's not only a level of respect for the coach, it's a level of respect for the process.
Yeah. And the difficulty of the process.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But that's a good point too. I think that's because if you're the coach in this equation, and today's more about being coachable and less about coaching, but that is how the coach ultimately begins to feel is if I'm giving you this feedback and although you're receiving it well, you're not getting to work on it, I'm going to get frustrated. Yeah. I'm going to feel like either you don't think I know what I'm talking about or you don't care.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah. And I think as the coach, they can't care more than you care.
Right.
Like they can't work harder than you work. And that's what being coachable is. I'm going to match the effort. It's what I try to tell my children. My expectation of you is you got to match the effort that is taking your mother and I to provide you the experiences that you want to have. Mm-hmm. And that's hard for them to do, but at least come close.
Yeah. Right.
That's being coachable and that's respecting what we're talking about.
Yeah, you need to at least see the attempt to do that, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah. And then the last piece that we talk about all the time, Drew, being coachable means I'm going to learn to hold myself accountable and I'm going to let you hold me accountable. Mm-hmm. So as we lay out the framework, the foundation, hey, here's some gaps that exist. Hey, the sense of humility that comes with I don't know it all, I need some help. I'm curious about what you have to offer. Hey, here's a good action plan. Here's the things we're going to do in the 30, 60, 90 days to really see if we're making progress. That last piece of being coachable is learning to be held accountable.
Yep. Which is huge because let's go back to our example here of, maybe you do have that growth mindset where you're able, you want to be better. You're hungry, right? You're hungry to improve. You've gotten the feedback. You were humble about it. And you moved into action. But guess what? The things you're doing to close the gap aren't working as well as you want them to, nor are they working as well as other people around you want them to. So guess what? You might need to do it differently.
Yeah.
Like you might have to come up with a different plan, a new plan. You might need to do more of whatever the thing is that you're doing. So like you've got to be willing to be held accountable if the thing that you're doing in an effort to change isn't working.
So maybe we would add adaptable and accountable. That goes back to your opening definition of coachability. Hey, a willingness and openness to change, a willingness to adapt and implement, and a willingness to be held accountable. That is maybe what I'm thinking about is, hey, I'm going to create a conversation and connection of follow-up. How am I doing? How can we be objective? I'm going to get your feedback and say, is this working or not working? If not, I'm willing to adjust and adapt the game plan.
Yep. Well, and I think what's embedded in all of this is the relationship, obviously, because part of the accountability piece is you're willing to realize and recognize that it can't always just happen on your terms. Like it can't just be about how you want to get better, how you want to grow. Like you've got to be willing to submit to some degree of accountability from someone else.
Yeah, and I think to me, accountable in this sense of being coachable is accountable to the organization.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're in a sports arena or whether you're in a family or whether you're in a corporate setting at work, accountability means, hey, the role we need you to play is this.
Right.
And you may be great at this, but the role this team has for you in this moment is for this. And so I'm going to submit to that. I'm going to get feedback on whether that's working or not. To me, that's being accountable not only to my own progress, but to the goals of the organization.
All right, just to review there, let's make sure we have this whole sequence in place because for our listeners, it's really important that we're clear on this and we have this framework down, but it's growth mindset is where it all begins.
Yes.
Then you've got to have the humility to receive these things well, right? Then you got to get moving, and then you've got to be willing to be held accountable. But that's the pathway. And if you go back and you look at people, and an easy way to illustrate this is like if you think right now, come up with someone in your mind who you would say, this person's really coachable. And I've known them for a while, or I've worked with them, or maybe I know them in my personal life. I can almost guarantee you that these things we just went through, these are all the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
With consistency.
Yeah, I'm running through my list of people in my mind, and that sense of curiosity, that sense of humility, that sense of growth. That's kind of where it starts.
I just want to say one last thing on just how prized of a characteristic this is, right? Because like I can think of a big hiring project that we're a part of right now with a big company who's trying to hire a bunch of people quickly, and no one's asked me at any point, to what degree do I think this candidate is smart? And no one's ever asked me how smart they are.
Yeah.
No one's ever asked me, how critical of a thinker they are, how good of a problem solver. No, none of that. Tons of people have asked me how coachable I think these people are. And like that's what people are looking for.
I mean, we're getting ready to start for you and for us the football kickoffs, the preseason meetings, and I can promise you, as we look at our player personnel, there's a question on every player: how coachable have they been? Are they coachable? We aren't looking at the talent opens the door, but Bill Parcells said character gets you the other side. I think today we're making a pretty good argument. It's coachability.
Coachable, yeah.
So let's think about, Drew, if I want to start and create this mindset of how do I become more coachable? We've already kind of laid it out. Here are the 4 things you really need to pay attention to, the foundations of being coachable. But for someone's like, hey, to be honest, I haven't been very coachable. I've been doing this for a long time. Where do we start? What are a couple of suggestions as we wrap up to start becoming more coachable?
You might need to go apologize to somebody. Honestly, you might need to start with that. You might need to think about, okay, what are the examples in my life where maybe I haven't been real coachable? And, maybe that hasn't necessarily triggered tension and conflict and that type of stuff. But if it has, you might want to start there, quite honestly, because it's more than likely that has happened.
Yeah, and it's so easy, I think, to play the victim game here. We see a lot of people play the victim, and they might, well, this person is just not a very good coach, or they're critical, or they're this, or they're that, that we don't take ownership. And so I love this piece. If you haven't been coachable, take some ownership of it.
Yeah.
Great place to start.
Yeah, so I think that's a logical place to start. And then, I think beyond that, what do you do next? If you want to just start asking people, like if you haven't been real coachable, there's probably not a long line of people waiting to give you feedback because they're not fools. You might need to start asking for some feedback, even in just small ways, just simple things like, hey, I'm kind of working through this thing right here, and this is what I think a reasonable plan is. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, not even bias the reasonable plan.
Yeah,
hey, I'm trying to work through this. What would you recommend? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah,
what do you think? That's such an empowering word to someone, and they may be hesitant to give that information based on how you responded to their feedback in the past.
Right.
And so, hey, I really mean it this time, and I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to grow. What do you think about this? What advice would you have? Where would you start?
Basic open-ended questions.
Yeah, and so in the spirit we want you to ask that with is a sense of curiosity and vulnerability.
Yeah, big word.
Like, it's so hard to be vulnerable, especially in today's world, because you don't want to be seen as less than.
Yep.
But that admitting vulnerability, admitting you don't have all the answers, admitting that you need help can be so empowering to the people around you.
Yep. And, let's think about this. Maybe some people are listening to this right now who are even like earlier in their career. This is a massive, like, if you can do this honestly and develop a good, positive kind of brand for yourself and reputation for yourself in the space, what a differentiator.
What is being coachable?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like,
how many doors open up for you?
Yeah. I mean, newsflash, there are a million smart people out there. Like, there's a million people smarter than you. So, not you, Milt.
There's a lot more than that. There's a lot more than that.
There are so many people out there who are smarter, faster. Like if that's the arena, if that's the arena in which you're trying to win, good luck.
I love the title you just came up with in my mind. Coachability as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, if you want to stand out, focus on being coachable.
Yeah,
like, this is a space where you can be highly competitive.
Yeah, I love that idea. And that coachable means, okay, I'm going to invite the right people to be on my team with where I am right now. Like, coachability means I'm open to everybody, but sometimes it is, I got to find the right teammate. I got to get the right people on the bus, people that believe in me, people that encourage me and not just criticize me, people that want what's best for me, that aren't in competition with me. Those are the kind of people that have that growth mindset, that sense of curiosity, that are interested, not interesting. So that piece is so important, but I love creating coachability as a competitive advantage.
I mean, that's why teams implode oftentimes. Right?
Yes.
I mean, senior leadership teams that don't make it, it's normally not because they didn't have enough degrees in the room or experience in the room. It's because they couldn't get along.
Yeah. And they can't get along because they're so proud and so defensive of what they're responsible for.
My corner of the universe. That's right.
Yeah, that they aren't willing, they don't exhibit these characteristics that we're talking about.
Okay, I know we got to move to a close. So hopefully, again, as we started, just a relevant word and construct across all facets of life. So hopefully you can find some areas to put this into practice immediately. But as you said, start with you.
Yeah.
Start with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't forward this podcast to the 10 people you think in your life could use some guidance on being more coachable. Just start with you.
That's where I'm laughing. I was like, man, this would be a really good one to be. Do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, I hope it hits home for our audience. I hope it's relevant. If you have any questions, please submit them. If you want some follow-up conversations, and also if you don't mind giving us a review, liking us, I think that's what you're supposed to do. We appreciate you listening to the Growth Project and hope this contributed to your life and helping you be better and pursue better.